43.3. All right, we should talk about Jared Kushner for half a second.
No, we were supposed to talk about the EPA.
Oh, yeah, we read up on the EPA, and it was, the liberal news sources said, save the EPA. The conservative news sources said the EPA is corrupt, terrible, get rid of it. There were no specific stories that I could find that,
Yes, there are.
There was one story that said the EPA is really sloppy in allocating grant money to
Not
research.
sloppy in allocating grant money. They're giving it to themselves.
Yeah.
They've awarded 220 million people to themselves. $220 million to themselves.
To advisory board members.
But the advisory board members are them. They're giving themselves their own money. They're getting $220 million from the taxpayers to study global warming, and then they're giving it to themselves to put in their own personal bank accounts to study global warming. It's completely and utterly corrupt. It's the definition of corruption.
Kinda, except that the EPA budget, for all it does, is $8 billion. So you're talking about less than 3% going to these research grants.
Rick, if someone gave you personally 3% of the EPA budget, that's $220 million you could put in your bank account. It's corruption. They didn't take the whole $8 billion. Sorry, Rick, I must be wrong. I give you the debate.
If you have science people on your board to advise you, and then you're paying the science people.
Right, you don't pay them. You get neutral people. You say, listen, you from Harvard will not get this money, but you can pick someone from Yale or Princeton to get the money. That seems
reasonable. It seems reasonable to implement that policy rather than shut down the whole EPA.
Well, the problem is that not only that, but they also have a revolving door policy.
I read about that.
Which means that you're arguing to support certain industries, and then as soon as you leave the EPA, maybe a month later, you get hired to work by that company and get $1 million salary. Yeah. That's the same kind of corruption.
No, it's a different kind. It's corruption, but it's a different kind of corruption.
Okay, Rick,
and also
for God's sake.
But also fixable.
No, it's fixable when you get rid of anybody that had anything to do with this.
Okay, fine. But don't shut down the whole agency.
Well, you may have to fire half of them.
I doubt you have to fire half.
Well, you don't know. The point is that I've
you don't bring in a know nothing Bible thumper to scuttle the entire agency.
Yes, you do.
When because you can do some rule changes.
You know what? I happen to like Bible thumpers, first of all. Number two,
in science positions,
I have now exposed a revolving door policy, which is the definition of classic governmental bureaucratic corruption. A guy that gets hired by the agency by the company he was regulating the month before. That's bribery. Number two, I'm talking about an $8 billion budget wherein hundreds of millions of dollars is doled out to your buddies that work at the agency. That's two instances of bribery on a grand scale. So guess what, Rick? I was right. The EPA needs dramatic reformation, and part of draining the swamp, which is what we elected Trump to do, is what is being carried out. And you have no leg to stand on. You should just admit that Trump is doing a good job in trying to rein in this corrupt organization.
Nope. It's a big organization in charge of protecting the environment. Now, where it's failing, you fix stuff. Are you going to shut down Congress because it has a revolving door policy? Or are you going to establish rules that say that somebody who's a congressman, once they leave, can't work for a lobbying firm for several years? You don't shut down Congress. You establish rules that fix it. You don't throw out the frickin' baby with the frickin' polluty bathwater.
If it turns out, as they're suggesting, that the EPA is one of the most corrupt organizations.
Yeah, the conservative.
Yeah, well, what I just said is true. And if what I just said is true, then it is a deeply, systematically corrupt organization. I'm not going to quibble with you. about whether it needs to be shut down or part of it needs to be shut down. What I'm pissed off about is you can't just say, you know what, maybe this guy Trump has a point. Just be honest.
Why don't you appoint somebody who actually knows science?
Well, how do you know this guy is so bad?
Because
he's a Bible thumper?
Because he knows no science.
I don't care. I could do it. I could do the job. Anybody that's honest and won't take bribes should be put in charge of that organization to monitor them. They don't need a scientist. They need somebody to fire the corrupt people. It's a justice. It's a legal issue.
No, it's a guy. He appointed a guy who, when he was Attorney General of his state.
Oh, he just happens to be an Attorney General. Well, what do you know?
Sued the EPA 24 times.
Trump is actually using an Attorney General to look into bribery. What a thought!
No, he's not looking into bribery. He's running the entire agency with the intention of
looking into corruption.
No, of making it as ineffectual as he belongs to a church.
The perfect man.
He's
for
got
the job.
no science education, and he belongs to a church.
I don't want him to have science education.
That says it's a sin not to use coal and oil.
The earth was given to be for man to have dominion upon it. All the beasts of the field were there for him to enjoy and copulate with, okay? Well, let's move on to a different subject, please.
All right, Jared Kushner, president's son-in-law, has met with, is $1.2 billion in debt on his family's more than $1 billion in debt on this 666 Park Avenue, a skyscraper they own. They need loans because they need new loans because an old loan is coming due. Kushner apparently met with they can't get a loan because they've been sucky at doing this until Kushner met with a couple banks who promised to loan him a total of $509 million. And were in return apparently given meetings at the White House. So this looks bad. $509 million is enough to get Jared Kushner into Harvard 203 times because it cost his dad a $2.5 million contribution to Harvard to get Jared in there in the first place, to go to college. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
If Jared Kushner is peddling influence, he should be prosecuted.
Okay. All right, you want to move on to the Oscars?
Sure.
All right. Some movies annoyed you this year.
Oh, I'm
think
just trying to calm down.
Jordan Peele, I think, won Best Screenplay for Get Out.
All right. As I've said earlier, Get Out is a sick fantasy that plays into all of the most paranoid delusions that the most radical, bigoted black person has about white people.
Sounds like a good basis for a horror movie.
And it should never, I think I can tell what the plot was to our millions of listeners. Spoiler alert. Can I spoil alert?
Let me do it so we don't give away too much.
All right.
Turns out that
as soon as you say it, people are going to know the whole thing.
No,
the only good part of the movie was it was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, so it turns out that
right, spoiler alert, he's going to give away the plot.
It turns out that some white people are abusing black people.
They're using black people.
No, don't, that's fine, that's enough.
No, it really isn't, because
don't
it's
give it
so
away.
vile. It's so foul.
Yeah, but don't give it away. Don't give it away. But it's a horror movie. Horror movies aren't documentaries. Zombies don't exist. Vampires don't exist. Werewolves don't exist. White people...
Rick, I can't argue about this unless you let me say what they're doing.
Can we just say that it has something to do with mind control?
No, we can say
No,
that
no,
this
no,
is
no,
a
no,
spoiler alert. Just turn off the video right now if you don't want to hear what happens in this movie. And then turn it back on in 3 minutes.
Or watch another one of our 112 videos.
Thank you. Basically, any film that people make where white people are capturing black men so that they can use them as their bodies as studs and put their mind into black people's bodies is insanity. It's the sickest fantasy ever imagined. But why the hell does it have to be only black people and only white people taking their bodies so that they can use them for sex because they have superior bodies? It's sick. And if it was in reverse, if you had black people taking white people and
White brains.
white, whatever it is whites are good at, I don't know, playing video games, and using and cutting them up, people would say this is crazy. It would never get the green light. It would never be done in Hollywood. To say that white people are using blacks to take their bodies because they have superior bodies and putting their brains in black people's bodies is crazy, bigoted racism. People are going to think we were nuts to ever let this film be made.
It's a horror movie. I saw a horror movie where a high school girl had teeth in her vagina.
Hey, that's true.
All right, you want to move on to Best Picture was The Shape of Water.
That's even worse. Anybody that ever ate a fish is going to be worried about this movie.
Okay, so
But wait, there's more. The other film that won a lot of awards was 3 Billboards in
outside something, Missouri.
Yeah, and that again is the craziest liberal fantasy imaginable. Like some lunatic liberal imagined the most racist cops on earth that had nothing to do but beat up innocent minorities and women. It was like if you took the craziest, most insane liberal and said, "Here, make a movie about anything you want." Oh, I know. I'll take these Southern people, these cops, and I'll have them beating up all kinds of innocent people and being racist and sexist.
Hold on, it was one cop who was racist.
No, they were all racist. They all turned a blind eye, and they only stopped when the federal government put a black person in charge of the department. Remember?
Well, I remember that
and there was a lot of cruelty to women too, because white Southern men do nothing but beat up women.
All right. Well,
and you like that, don't you? Because you're from California or New York, and we all know what white people are like down in the middle of America. They're all a bunch of hicks and brutal, violent, racist, misogynists, right?
So you're not allowed to...
And all the black people and the women in the movie were saints. And all the men in the movie that were white were evil.
No, well, hold on, because the Frances McDormand's character was kind of an asshole and was acknowledged.
She had to be an asshole because white men are so bad.
No, she was more... It was acknowledged in the movie that she was as much of an asshole as she needed to be and more. And her daughter, the homicide victim, was an asshole. It's one of those movies where all right, I'll admit that like some of the biggest assholes were racists, but everybody's an a-hole to some extent.
Not at all. They're justifying women being as big assholes as possible because they have to be. It's a way of saying you really need to be an asshole because white men are such scum. You need to kick them in the nuts. That's what you have to do. You can't even reason with them. That's the whole point of the film, is for women to just stop taking shit from white men. We're rapists. We enjoy it when something bad happens to a woman. We don't investigate it. We want to hurt black people. It's just that, and especially down south, Nothing's changed since 1960.
Would you call it a drama or a comedy?
A comedy? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was so horrifying.
Yeah.
Laughter? You think I'm going to laugh? No. Yeah, that's right. I'm a white guy. I laugh when women get raped. That's my idea of a funny joke.
It's been called a dark comedy, which means it's got a certain element of absurdity. It's pretty exaggerated.
Well, what are they trying to prove? What's the point? That you can't trust Southern white men? And especially if they're cops?
What was the point of the Pink Panther? Movies don't always have to have points. Sometimes they're entertaining. Now, I admit this movie's more pointed than a straight-out comedy, but it's at least partially just for entertainment. And you do have one major character who we think is going to be a huge a-hole, who ends up apologizing in a dramatic way, for not being able to solve the crime that's at the center of the movie.
Oh, well, that's because liberals imagine that they're even willing to see good in a white man, a white heterosexual, even a white heterosexual man. They're able to forbear.
Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't have a good white heterosexual man and say, well, that's just to show liberals are tolerant. You can't twist every aspect of the movie.
Every aspect of the movie is condescending and hating of white men. Absolutely, I can say that absolutely unapologetically. I mean, and in fact, all of the realizations in the movie, all the changes of character, is when white men realize, I really am an asshole. I wish I could stop being a white man and be nice like a woman or a minority member. God, it was horrible.
Well, I mean, the one guy who apologizes.
No, even at the end, the Sam Rockwell character.
I know
he turns out to be he turns out to be a possibly redeemed. You can redeem him because liberals are so full of compassion that, you know what, I think even an evil racist has some good in him. Like the liberal writer is so confused and sick that he's thinking, I'll see some good in the racist. It's sad, and it's this. And the other sick movie we talked about, Get Out, are examples of liberal control over the film industry, making paranoid liberal fantasies.
Well, nobody takes, I don't know, maybe some people, naive people or dumb people, take 3 billboards entirely literally. But just to
when I was walking
no, hold on. Let me say a thing. The main white character doesn't really change.
He ends up killing himself.
Spoiler alert. But no, he ends up killing himself for
being a white guy.
No, he doesn't kill himself for that. His personality doesn't change at all throughout.
What kind of a movie shows this guy killing himself, and it went right by you. It's like, he kills himself. Rick sees no significance in that act. That meant nothing to Rick.
He killed himself because he had terminal cancer and he didn't want to burden his family.
I understand, but how about...
But he didn't change his personality. He turns out he was an upstanding guy. The whole movie, this white guy that you think that one of the tricks of the movie is you think he's going to be an obstructive a-hole.
Yeah, but it was his negligence that led to the whole situation.
Not really, no. He regretted not being able to...
He couldn't capture the guy.
It wasn't negligence.
And he hired this racist cop, Sam Rockwell.
But his hiring the cop has nothing to do with whether he can solve the crime or not.
It's both. He's not competent, and so he kills himself.
No, he kills himself because he didn't want to burden his family with him as he died of cancer.
He met.
You're twisting it to fit your agenda.
He met with a bad end, which is what the writer wanted. The writer wanted these Southern cops to all meet with tragic endings,
Well,
which
no.
they do.
The only one guy meets with a tragic ending.
Right, and the other guy has to live with being himself,
No,
which
well,
is in
he
itself a
loses his-
tragedy.
And you're twisting everything to fit your schema. All right. What's another movie that annoyed you?
Well, what else won?
Did Phantom? I don't know. Not Phantom. I don't think it won much. I, Tonya. You liked
I, Tonya was a good movie.
We both liked I, Tonya.
Except that neither of us can figure out whether whether Tonya Harding was really that good. Nobody will ever know that one.
Yeah. All right. Ask us another thing.
Well, The Darkest Hour.
That was the best film of the year because it inspired patriotism in Western civilization and the willingness to fight off the enemies of the Western world.
Rick?
Decent movie. Gary Oldman got Best Actor for being Churchill. What about Dunkirk? It was the exact same period in time.
But before you guys move on, did you see any parallels with Winston Churchill and any other leaders?
Well, you know perfectly well that Trump is the next Churchill. If he can defend our country, and it's going to be hard because he's got enemies from without and from within.
And within himself.
No, within the Democratic Party that tried to gut the military budget. The Democrats that would leave us defenseless in the face of our enemies by destroying our military. Do you know we were 1,000 pilots short?
Yeah, because you mention it every other episode.
And it doesn't bother you then. It never does. You have no concern.
I think
You're
we'll be
safe.
okay as long
Nothing
as we
bad will
keep
happen to
spending a
you.
shitload of money on the military.
Right. Well, that's not what your leaders think. You should be voting Republican.
But every year we spend a huge amount on the military.
Yeah, we spend the least we've ever spent, and our military is in disrepair.
Our military is still the strongest force in the world.
It's the
But you say it
strongest force
doesn't
in the
matter
world.
because
No.
we have to be able to fight on
Four
four
countries.
fronts
Yes.
simultaneously.
Yes, we do.
Which-
Yes, we do, because we've got Russia and Iran are not going to fight each other. We have to face Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. They're not going to fight each other. North Korea is not going to fight China. We're the one that has to fight those four countries. So having the strongest military is irrelevant.
All
If
right,
it
so
was
let's move on.
one-on-one,
All right.
So in terms of the Oscars, and let's say, talking about gun control, do you think there was armed security at the Oscars?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, but then
They-
they
have
but they were protesting gun control. Do you think that's a little bit hypocritical?
No, I mean, guns were appropriate. I mean, they have snipers up on the roof all along that stretch of Hollywood Boulevard. And yeah, I'm sure they have undercover people inside who are armed.
So does that mean that Hollywoodites are better than regular citizens?
No,
Because they can have the cover of rifles and high-powered rifles, but the regular citizen can't. I'm being the devil's advocate.
security where appropriate. If there were a way to reduce, I mean, I had to work across the street from the Oscars for many years, and we couldn't park. We had to get bussed in. We couldn't leave our own little building, which was fenced off from the rest of. I mean, if you were a terrorist attacking America's biggest celebrities, that's an attractive target. So high security is appropriate.
Lance, you want to comment?
thank God that Trump destroyed the most powerful terrorist organization in the world, ISIS. No thanks to the Democrats, and apparently Rick doesn't give a crap.
Obama probably took us 60% of the way to the end of ISIS is still going, but it's severely hampered.
By Trump.
And by Obama for fighting him for nearly 3 years before Trump
Ineffectively.
No, let's not do this again, because we've done it too. I don't want
Well, I'll tell you what, the one thing you've never done is given Trump any credit. Can you give Trump some credit?
Yeah, he knocked ISIS the rest of the way out.
All right, I'll settle for that. Do we have anything else?
I think that because it is Oscar night, and I know you may be uncomfortable with it, Lance, but we should really talk about, we here have the son of an Oscar winner, right?
Okay, sure. Let it be said. First of all, I want people to know I didn't get any money from my father being an Oscar winner. That he won the Oscar the year I was born, and things changed a lot over the next 50 years. So, what is the question, though? I can tell you this much. He beat out Ingmar Bergman to win the award. And he was nominated against himself. He had 2 films nominated the same year. So when we talked to him about it, we asked him if he was nervous about it. He said actually no, because he had 2 chances out of 5. So he was pretty damn confident.
What were the pictures?
Pillow Talk, which was the first of the Doris Day Rock Hudson comedies, and was voted one of the top 100 comedies of all time. And the other was a film called Operation Petticoat with Tony Curtis and Cary Grant. And that was before he wrote The Pink Panther, which was also voted one of the top 100 comedies of all time.
And one of the most successful movie franchises in history.
Right, $1 billion, well over $1 billion. So my father made a lot of people money. Not his son, Lance, but a lot of people in Hollywood made money off my dad.
And just, again, for those people that may not know, what is your dad's name?
Maurice Richland. And he was a great writer. He was comedic, a writer of comedic genius. And he'd be very happy with, as he was recognized in his time, and he continues to be recognized. He's on a lot of lists of important comedic writers.
Did he share with you what his process was in terms of writing? Did you ever see him write?
Yeah, I saw him write a lot. One of the keys to his thing was that he started writing when he was in his 20s professionally. He started writing for newspapers. He wrote when he was in the Army in World War II, he wrote for the camp newspaper. He wrote for the LA Times. He went from journalism to radio. He went from radio to TV. He went from TV to film. So he was he really paid his dues. He knew how to write from the bottom up. And one of the ways they trained him, Rick's heard this story, is that they'd have 5 writers on a radio show or a TV show, and each of them would write jokes, and they'd keep names of who wrote which joke. And then they would time the laughter. There'd be a man in charge of timing how long the audience laughed at each joke. And if you were the winner, if your jokes had the longest laughter, you became the head writer, and you made more money. So he learned, the most absolutely
viciously competitive way possible.
Thank you for helping me, because I'm not speaking well tonight. How to write jokes. So he knew what made people laugh the hard way, and that was one of his secrets, was to be able to come up with a joke quickly that he knew people would think was funny.
And what kind of personality was your dad? I mean, what temperament did he have?
He was very, very even-tempered man, very gentle. We didn't kid around a lot at home. He wasn't like a comedian, but he was actually very cerebral, very kind of calm, thoughtful. intellectual man.
And your father, Maurice Richland, where was he born and where was he raised? And
He was from he was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, and he went to journalism school in Missouri. At the time, they had a great journalism school. I don't think he graduated. Maybe the war came, and he found himself as a journalist in Los Angeles. I think he wrote for the Hollywood Star and then the LA Times. Then he found himself writing comedy for all the comedians of that era on radio.
I'd like to say that my dad has been one of the greatest CPAs in the history of the state of New Mexico.
was your father, what is his, I haven't met your father yet, but from what I hear, he sounds like a really cool dude. What was his temperament like, Rick? His personality?
He was the guy that I went to visit for a month every summer because my parents were divorced. And he always drove cool cars like a GTO, and then he drove all the Datsun and then Nissan 280 300Zs. He had a Firebird.
Why do you suppose that is?
That was his main indulgence. He liked a sporty car. Also, he has OCD where he used to carry around 40 pens in his in the pockets of his blazer. And the weight of the pens, because these were fancy pens, probably over $1,000 in pens at any one time, the weight of the pens would eventually destroy the jacket from the inside.
You know, that's kind of interesting because I think you inherited his love of numbers and his OCD. That's a real genetic thing you got there.
Yeah. He wrecked his eyes so badly at staring at little numbers that he had to have his tear duct reconstructed. They had to run a hose into the corner of a little teeny hose, had to implant in his eye so his eye would water.
Rick, what's 72 divided by 5?
14.4.
Okay, just so you know.
Okay.
How do you do that, Rick? What is it that you runs through your head?
You double 72 and divide by 10.
Well, of course. You didn't know that?
Oh, and last question for Mr. Richland.
Okay.
And since it is Oscar night, otherwise
Yes.
you're indulging us. Who are some of the celebrities that your dad ran around with that you got to meet? Maybe?
Oh, God. You know, a lot of these people are forgotten, but he hung out with the best. I mean, Cary Grant was actually really liked my dad, and we met Cary in London, and he just came right up to my dad and was just really friendly, and we asked him, "What's the deal? Why does Cary Grant?" Cary Grant was, at that time, the biggest star in Hollywood, and he was surrounded by people. But when he saw my father, he made way and darted toward him to shake his hand. And my father said that Operation Petticoat was the first film in history where the star got a piece of the money, or it was the best deal an actor ever got up to that time in terms of the share of the profits. So he actually made Cary Grant rich. Cary Grant made $7 million off that movie, which was a record for the time. So he always had a soft spot for my dad. We hung out with Dom DeLuise was over the house a million times. They were writing a script. Met Elliot Gould, James Mason, Barbara Streisand.
David Niven, you got to sit on his lap.
Well, no, we told that story in an
Already?
earlier show.
Yeah.
It was a good one.
Okay.
David Niven, and oh God, who else? Zsa Zsa Gabor,
Zsa Zsa Gabor's
Peter Sellers.
just my brush with fame.
Oh, okay.
Zsa Zsa Gabor's dog bit my uncle.
Well, I can say it now. My father maintains that Zsa Zsa Gabor hired him to write a script and never paid him. Or he wrote it and never got paid. So that's what he said. So she can sue me if she wants. What else? Oh God, everybody else. Barbara Streisand, I just said, but who used to come over? Anthony Newley was a big British star. Used to come over to the house. Lee Marvin, we rented his house in Brentwood. We just rented his house. We weren't buddies with Lee Marvin. If I think of more, I'll tell you.
You lost your virginity to Jane Mansfield.
Did you read Jane's book?
She was probably gone by the time. Yeah, she had an early and tragic end.
I lost my virginity to a soul singer in a New Orleans nightclub.
Okay.
So you seem to have turned out all right now. You were in a Hollywood brat. I mean,
Well,
what are your impressions of growing up in Hollywood?
we weren't. Okay, I don't want to get into every detail of my financial life, but writers didn't make a lot of money. I mean, we were somewhat comfortable, but we weren't really rich. I mean, we didn't own a house until I was in high school, and my father unfortunately had to support 10 people. He had 2 families because of a divorce, so we didn't live in much luxury, but we were okay. I don't have any complaints, but it wasn't possible to really develop a lot of bratty qualities. I don't think. I mean, if I'm an asshole, I'm an asshole because of my personality, not because of any advantages my father gave me.
How much more time?
We got about 30 seconds.
Okay, so subscribe to this thing, the Rick Rosner channel, and to hear more stories of celebrity.
And by the way, it is Oscar night. You wrote for Jimmy Kimmel, weren't you? Didn't you?
Yeah, if I hadn't been fired a few years ago, I would have been writing jokes that didn't make air tonight. I would have been backstage.
So we have both of you guys are connected to the Oscars now.
Very remotely. One time I wrote for the Emmys, and I got to see Morena Baccarin on the way to the bathroom.
I think it's best that Rick pursue his genius independently instead of writing comedy for anybody. He's got things to say about physics, and he should be pursuing that. So it's for the best.
Okay.